environmental justice is not separate from racial justice. It's not separate from any other social justice issue. It's all connected. And so I think the sooner that we start valuing human lives and the way that they're affected by our environments, the sooner we can see change in all of these areas.
I'm curious if our systems were more localized, like if our systems were more human and like more involved human interpersonal connection more, like would police like even need to exist? Like would we be able to just like have those connections in a, respectful and like human way? And like, I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts about it, but
I think that one of the things that is really important about solving a lot of the issues that go on in our like locally like our country, our world, is just like acknowledging that everything is so intertwined. And I like that you brought up the issue of like police brutality and racism, because everything is really interconnected. And I think that if everyone that kind of had like their specific kind of focus, like a lot of social justice people that like activists, they have their own kind of thing that they focus on. And I think that it would there would be so much change if people really came together and saw how every issue going on in our society like overlapped. And yeah, I think that could be like really changing to the whole world and our whole society.
Just think we have to acknowledge our history of slavery in this country, and that labor force was there around like food resources, amongst other things. And so you can't talk about food today in 2020 separate from without acknowledging that history, and also the history of our policing system in this country used to maintain that labor force. So there are definitely clear connections. I hope that's okay. I'm talking about this on Facebook Live, but it's important, I think, that we make that connection, and I appreciate that we have the space in the ELC to talk about it. So like you all said, we can't advance environmental justice without talking about racial justice and demanding that police brutality ends and that we prioritize Black lives and Indigenous lives. So thank you.
So we also learned that women and people of color are not represented as much in the coding world. This can lead to major bias in tech.
For example, there was a soap dispenser created that did not recognize darker skin tones, and it made it harder for people that had darker skin tones to get soap, which is kind of messed up.
Yeah, and we also learned just this horrible thing when you type into Google something like for teenagers, you get these pictures of like happy-go-lucky white teenagers. What happens when you search for Black teenagers? Mugshots. It's so horrible.
And a while ago, there was a similar problem with Michelle Obama, where when she first became the first lady, people would Google her and pictures of monkeys would pop up.
These are algorithm problems. It's not that the computers and algorithms have bias. It's the people programming the computers that have racist and biased outlooks on people of color. This can look like feeding in data that is only white people to represent teenagers.
But we trust search engines like Google to give us facts, to represent an equitable world. There are not enough people of color and women in STEM.
Why We Code really opened up our eyes to see how important it is for us as women and women of color to shape this field.
If more women are given opportunities to learn about coding and technology, there will clearly be more women who want to go into these fields, and that is what our world needs. There needs to be more learning opportunities for young women in STEM fields so they can get to this point.
Amen. Now, I wanted to ask, what ways have you all noticed bias in technology that you use every day, or maybe every now and again, since we started talking about this in Why We Code?
So like I mentioned before, like sometimes soap dispensers, they don't recognize my skin tone. So like I like put my hand under the soap and I'm like, where's the soap? And it takes like 5 tries until it can finally come, which is like really messed up. Like it should work the same for everyone.
That's really
Mhm.
messed up.
Just like for me, my mom is a nurse, and so I know that there are a lot of algorithms out there that refer white people first before Black people, especially when there's like major problems with them.
I'll share one that just came to my head. I've been using Instagram a lot to look at like anti-racism education, and I see so often that posts that are talking about white people and like toxic white culture, they're always taken down immediately by Instagram, whereas there's like these horrible accounts that have been up for years and years that are super, super racist. So like, what is that?
Yeah.
Even on TikTok too. I see that on TikTok.
Yeah. Like the people who come up on your For You page are mostly like white people. And it's way harder for like a person of color to go famous.
And sometimes, for example, like Zoom, when you're using the virtual backdrops, darker skin tones like me aren't like easily visible in the backdrops because the darker you are, like the harder it is to like show up in the background because there aren't as many people that have been used to
like test it out.
yeah.
Yeah, I hear you, Aja. You're saying they didn't use enough diversity to different diverse skin tones to check out if their virtual backgrounds are even going to work. I totally hear you.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share before we move on? Cool. Who wants to introduce the next folks?